Do you like scary movies? I, myself, have never been a fan. I don't like being scared. Whenever I watched them as a kid, I found myself hiding behind my parents when something even slightly eerie got on screen. I hate the feeling of my heart racing, of the blood rushing to my face when something jumped onto the screen to bring me out of my seat. I didn't like falling into a fight or flight mode. But if I go back today and I watch some of the scary movies that got me as a kid, it's a totally different experience. Movies like Paranormal Activity and Saw scared me for sure. There are definitely moments in those movies that are scary. Gore, violence, jump scares, the whole 9 yards. Those are all extremely good at getting somebody to be at the point of uneasiness, to feel that fear in the moment of watching, especially for a kid, but at no point did they have a real lasting effect on me. For example, I don't sit and rethink about this scene. While watching for the first time, yes, the pots and pans moving by themselves and the cabinets forcing themselves open in the house is scary, or at the very least off-putting, but it's not something that stays with you. I'm not walking into kitchens the next day still worried about something similar happening to me. That's where scary and horror diverge away from each other. While almost all horror is scary, not all scary things are horror. Horror is an entity unto itself. It's a genre where you are truly uneasy based on what you've experienced. It's not just the feeling of, what's around the corner? Will something pop out at me? It's this idea of, what if this harmless shape I'm looking at could take over my mind and body? Uzumaki by Junji Ito made me feel that for the first time. In an interview with Grape Japan, Ito spoke about how when he was first reading horror manga at the age of 4 or 5, he wasn't really getting scared by what he was reading. It wasn't until he started seeing TV shows with mediums going into haunted houses that truly made him feel scared. He wasn't even able to go to the bathroom by himself, as the bathroom at his house was at the end of an underground tunnel. The floor was made out of dirt, and from it there would be crickets and centipedes. These crickets were spider crickets. They had spotted bodies, long legs, and rounded backs. They would jump over you and everything else as soon as you got near them. While Ito says that these were direct influences on his works, I think that the particular circumstances of these encounters go deeper than that. The interviewer didn't go into this with Ito, so this next part's purely my own conjecture for how it influences works, but I think that it fits very well on a thematic level for what we can see from Ito's later works. Imagine being yourself at the age of 4 or 5, having to walk in a hallway with these types of creatures coming up from the ground. You make your way to the place where you know you're going to be at your most vulnerable. Alone, away from everyone else, there's no protection, as you're trying to relieve yourself. You desperately need to go, but you know that you have to cross through a bad place to do it. That first step of the earth beneath your feet. The hallway stretching further than you last remembered. The way that the bugs would crawl out from the earth underneath you, slowly revealing themselves little by little as they force the dirt out from up above them, closing the gap between you and all of the other bugs that are there in the hallway. Maybe some were already there, hiding in plain sight. On the walls, above you on the ceiling. Maybe one has already landed on your shirt and you haven't noticed. And even if you tried to resist the urge of going there, there comes the sense of dread as your own body works against you. Every passing moment after you drink a glass of water or enjoy dinner with your family, they all bring you one step closer to forcing yourself to visit that place. This betrayal of your own body puts you into a worse and more often threatening position. It's this feeling that, to me, is a through line in the works of Junji Ito. In Uzumaki in particular, this betrayal of your own mind and body is a constant. In the town of Churozocho, a remote village is plagued by spirals. Just spirals. Their shapes start to pop up around town. First, they appear in the cracks of walls, the winds that make their way through the city streets, and in the streams of water that run through it. But as the story progresses, we see people take more and more of an obsessive fixation on the swirls and incorporate them into their lives. They start with collecting valuables that resemble these spirals and end up sitting around for days just staring at the seemingly infinite pattern. As they continue, their very bodies start to look more like withered husks with sunken eyes and cheeks. Gashes and scabs appear on their face, but they're paid no mind as they continue to hunch over the spiral in front of them. Continuing down the path, their very bodies start to twist and form these spirals. They are unable to resist the allure of the spiral, and they start to break down mentally and physically. Body horror, beyond human abilities, all of which permeate themselves beyond the constraints of a normal human body. Even when they die and are cremated, the smoke coming out of the chimney covers the sky in an eerie and dark spiral that crosses the entire town. No one can avoid it. None can look away when these very smoke clouds start to form into the beings of their past selves, spitting out more spirals than they could have in their lives before. Even the wildlife and fauna start to slowly turn. It's subtle at first, but Ito has this masterful attention to detail, having it in the background of panels. It starts small, but as the grass coils up and the bugs start to form into these spirals, there's a constant reminder to the citizens that the spiral has infected every aspect of their lives. It's inescapable, and its presence is only growing stronger. So with this in mind, how does horror work in manga? In comparison to TVs or movies, it's very hard. There's basically no color outside of the random page here or there, no sound design, no eerie ambient music like I've been playing in this video. So without that, what does an author have that really turns the audience into realizing that something is very wrong here? How can you symbolize horror beyond the reader's imagination through nothing but still images? I would argue that Ito's greatest strength is his dynamic changes from one scene to the next. Things are calm. Panels are laid out as expected. He has this amazing sense of when to hang on to someone for just a little bit longer than you expect, enough to where you let your guard down, and then afterwards you're hit directly in the face with this very vicious change in tone and art that makes you pay attention and start to question what you're reading. Who is a friend to the main characters? Who are their enemies? Who has yet to be revealed? Are there people hiding in plain sight? In Chapter 3 of Uzumaki, the main character Kiri is friends with a popular girl named Azami Kuratani. During this time, Kiri and her boyfriend, Suichi, are still trying to learn what is causing the spirals that are starting to take over the town, and reeling from their past experiences with how that spiral has directly and tragically impacted Suichi's life. Azami is framed as this girl who is very pretty and constantly has men hitting on her. She's near pestered by every boy in their grade. Rumors start to swirl that she has a magic power through a scar on her forehead that attracts boys, and Kiri is told directly that Azami will use this power to steal Suichi away from her. Despite this, Azami convinces Kiri to introduce her to Suichi, and she obliges. As you see Suichi again, after some majorly tragic events that I won't spoil here, you see that he slowly emerges from his room with these deeply darkened eyes and posture. As he stands in the hallway, shadows don't cover his entire body, but rather just the top of his figure, placing him in the shadows. As Azami introduces herself and Suichi goes to do the same, you see that Ito takes a very deliberate attempt to show how shock and fear shoots across Suichi's face as he gets closer to Azami. These swirls, which I've interpreted as a precursor to a spiral, are surrounding her. Dozens of these lines point at her, drawing your eyes into her expression. Ito's art is gravitating, and it shows this tempting aura that she must have with all men who fall into her gaze. How many men have seen this power come over them? and just how many have fallen for this same trap. Shuichi resists and pulls away, and Ito very cleverly straightens out these lines in the close-up panel on the next page, shocking Azami. This is clearly the first time that this hasn't worked on someone, and it's more shocking to her than it is to the reader. Because Ito's art is so clear, without the need for words, you're directly told not to trust this person, and throughout the rest of the chapter, you are eager to see why Shuichi feels this way. Shuichi is convinced that she is a spiral incarnate, and no sooner does Ito reuse and enhance this same methodology with the swirls surrounding her body as she returns to Shuichi, trying to plant her claws on him once more. The lines are darker and more intense now. Her power is manifesting and growing stronger without Ito having to say it directly through dialogue or exposition. After she reveals a spiral on her forehead, where her scar used to be, this is turned from a creepy or weird aura to straight up body horror. The spiral continues to grow in size and strength, and we are seeing a young girl walk around town and interact with the other characters with a literal hole in her head. This only worsens, and it was because of how this storyline wrapped up that I knew there was nowhere to go but up while reading Uzumaki. You turn the page and you see this unbelievably detailed group of drawings that are just sure to make your toes curl. I mean, these are truly disturbing images. Azami takes off her hat, revealing that the spiral has now covered most of her head, and we see a panel by panel transition of it consuming her eye and optic nerve. It slowly and decidedly makes its way around each ring inside of her head, disappearing as it crosses into the void at the center of the spiral. And it's because of this methodology that Junji Ito is a master. You read for a dozen pages about an innocent schoolgirl who has to deal with boys harassing her, but it's through a gradual but eventually intense escalation of suddenly disturbing imagery that makes you reel in your seat and experience true horror. As the manga continues, this becomes only more and more disturbing. People who are trapped in their predicaments with no hope of getting better, some who take advantage of the spirals for their own positions, and those who are trapped in an unfair twist of fate that causes them to suffer untold horrors. I won't spoil how it ends, but I assure you that this read, while only being 19 chapters, or technically 20 if you want to include a bonus chapter called Lost Galaxies, is absolutely worth the read. I would imagine it wouldn't take you more than a day or two of casual reading to bring you to the ending of this absolute roller coaster, this story that is guaranteed to leave you with goosebumps. As the title of this video suggests, this is actually the first story that I have read of Junji Ito. I'm not a fan of scary movies, but it's through reading Uzumaki that I've learned the difference between scary and horror. It's opened me up to an entirely new world of manga, and if you find yourself liking the idea of being uneasy, then this is absolutely worth your time and effort. If you don't like the idea of being scared, I would still give this a shot, so you can learn the difference as well. With all that said, I will say that this isn't a perfect manga. Technically, no manga is, but I found myself really enjoying every chapter, despite some small grievances that don't really take away from the experience. For example, in about chapter 4, I continued to say to myself, why does anyone live here? Why hasn't anyone left? And while there are characters that suggest doing the same, they're shut down in the same panel most of the time. Later on, there are some in-canon reasons as to why people aren't leaving, but you feel like you're reaching some same heavy-handed criticism of lesser scary movies, and they're kind of ignored. I feel like with every scary movie I've ever watched, it's always the first thought in my head, why don't they just leave after the first sign of something paranormal? It doesn't really take away from my experience outside of some impatience at the beginning of the story, but if you're looking for something with really hard logic and all characters acting perfectly rational throughout, this might not be for you. But with all that said, I can't help but give Uzumaki a glowing review that is absolutely worth your time, even if you don't like being scared. I promise, you won't regret it. Now it's time to see if the spiral works on you. Does it twist your mind? Do you feel your body's proportions starting to twist and turn into a spiral shape? Perhaps it indulges you to like and subscribe and even leave a comment if you're so inclined. If you leave a suggestion, I just might make a video on that topic next. But seriously, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate the support. Look out later this month as I release some fun shorts that are sure to be worth the watch, and make sure to look out for the next video essay that I release. I also have a gigantic video that's been a huge work in progress, and it's already clocking in at over an hour in length, but I know it's going to be worth it. But thank you again for watching, and this was how these panels flowed.